Okay, 5 minutes on John Springhall. John Springhall is the author of Decolonization Since 1945, and this is the one reading that I've brought back up to you guys so that you can refresh your memory on decolonization and its historiography. Now, a couple of pieces of background information, not as important as some of the other authors that we've looked at, but he is a British academic, so it's good to know that you're getting a British point of view on decolonization. However, to complicate that, he has been teaching at the University of Ulster, which is in Ireland since 1970. Now, just ask my family. Ireland is still a colonial state. It is still colonized, especially Northern Ireland. So if he's teaching to an Irish audience in Ulster, there is a possibility that his points of view are more progressive than they might be if he was teaching in a traditional British university. Okay, so what does his book summarize? Now, this is the main thing. He doesn't really bring up new theories, he summarizes many theories. This is a book for undergraduates and for high school students like yourself. So, three major theories that other people have come up with that he summarizes. The nationalist explanation for decolonization, which basically focuses on anti-colonial movements like the Algerian Uprising and Gandhi Satyagraha movement. The internationalist explanations, which really focus on the Cold War and the new superpowers, and perhaps in response to them, the non-aligned movement. Then metropolitan explanations for this. This was popular later on in decolonization theory. The idea that local governments in Europe and the publics of Europe had a distaste or disinterest in continued empire. And he brings that up as well. But then he adds a new post-revisionist-ish twist in the conclusion. And we're going to talk about that in a second. Now, there's a link right here for a review of his work, but I will post that on the YouTube page as well. So the nationalist explanation, he supports this as a very strong explanation, a very popular explanation. You would see this in movies like Gandhi. You would see this in movies like The Battle of Algiers. Many books, many writers have talked about this, and they like this focus. This focus empowers nationalists and the people in the colonies to see themselves as the main actors in decolonization. So when you're talking about causes and when you're talking about the leaders of these things, Gandhi, Kwame Nkrumah, Ben Bella, you can focus on the nationalist explanation that Springhall discusses. Then there's the internationalist explanation. This is for people who step back and say, no, 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 it wasn't all those people rising up either violently, like in Algeria, or non-violently, like in India. It was just geopolitics, this new Cold War. And in fact, and there's a typo here in the second quote, the post-war anti-colonial front quickly dissolved once Truman's advisors in Washington came to recognize the value of Western European support against the Soviet Union. So the first quote talks about how the new superpowers wanted to end colonialism, but then the second quote talks about how, in reality, people like Truman and Eisenhower supported it because they didn't want the Soviet Union to expand its influence. It was another form of containment, Cold War containment. Then there's the metropolitan explanation, and he kind of makes short shrift of this. He kind of tosses this aside. He says that there's just no way. This became a more popular theory, but there's just no way to take all of the varying political and public opinions and attitudes towards decolonization or empire and say that there was a consistent movement or argument for decolonization. He gets rid of that. Now, what does he replace it with? Something that a lot of people have been looking at more and more, which is not the nationalist movements within the colonies, but the former elites within those colonies. Now, again, notice that both here and in the nationalist explanation, he uses the term periphery, so you know that this guy is familiar with world systems theory and perhaps a Marxist view of looking at things and favors it. But here we're talking about, he suggests that the Indian Rajas, the Kikuyu chiefs in Kenya, the Catholic elites in Indochina, like Vietnam, and the Harkis, meaning the Arab supporters of the French in Algeria, they were crucial in the process of decolonization because they either supported the nationalists or the imperializers, and because they had this traditional backing of power, they were probably more influential than people understand. And if you think about the old money in Brazil, these old elites in Brazil, and their influence on the government here, you'll know what he's getting at. That should make sense to you. So, that is a super quick rundown of Springhall. Read through those quotes, read through the little section of the book that I gave you, and let me know if you have any questions.